All right, so today we're diving into Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus
Oh, yeah, classic.
by John Gray. And it uses this super interesting concept, right? Men and women are from different planets.
Totally.
It's like we have these totally different ways of communicating and expressing our needs.
Like we're speaking different languages.
Exactly. So our mission today is to decode some of those languages and maybe help you avoid some communication mishaps in your relationships.
You know, it's funny how relevant this book still is.
Oh, totally.
Even though it was written a while ago,
Yeah,
I think it just taps into these like fundamental differences between men and women.
absolutely. And I
Yeah.
think we all experience that. Like, who hasn't felt like their partner was from a completely different planet at some point?
Right.
But Gray doesn't just point these differences out.
No.
He actually offers like a roadmap for understanding them.
Yeah.
So he starts by talking about how that initial spark of romance often gives way to this kind of disillusionment as couples start to see these Martian-Venusian clashes play out in everyday life.
Right. And he uses this example of Tom and Mary,
Yeah.
who are having a rough day, and Mary just wants Tom to listen to her,
Mhm.
be there for her emotionally. But Tom, being from Mars,
Oh, come on.
jumps right into problem-solving mode,
Classic Tom.
offering solutions, which makes Mary feel like he's not hearing her at all.
It's so relatable, though.
Oh, yeah.
Like when you just want to vent and your partner's like, well, have you tried this?
Exactly.
And you're like, no, I just want you to listen to me.
It's one of those classic examples
Yeah.
of how men and women just miss each other's signals.
Completely.
And it comes down to these like different emotional needs. You know,
Oh, for sure.
Gray argues that women, they crave validation and empathy,
Mm-hmm.
while men really prioritize offering solutions and fixing things.
So it's not that they don't care. It's just that they're kind of wired to show their love through actions or problem solving.
Exactly. And that's where things get tricky.
Yeah.
Because when those solutions aren't wanted or needed, it just leads to a lot of frustration on both sides.
Sure.
And he even points out these specific phrases that men commonly use
Oh, yeah.
that can actually invalidate a woman's feelings.
Oh, tell me.
Things like, you shouldn't worry so much.
Oh, I hate that one.
Or it's not that big of a deal.
Ugh. Like nails on a chalkboard.
Exactly.
When you're already feeling emotional.
Yeah, and that's when these core metaphors of the cave and the wave come into play.
Okay, the cave and the wave, I love this.
Yeah, it's so visual.
Yeah.
And he uses these to illustrate how men and women typically react to stress.
Mm-hmm.
So men, he says, they retreat to their caves.
Okay, so instead of wanting to talk things through,
Right.
they go quiet and withdraw.
Yeah.
I guess that's their way of coping.
Exactly. It's not that they don't care.
Okay,
It's that they need that space to recharge and figure things out on their own.
that makes sense.
And this is where Gray's advice gets really practical.
Okay, I like practical.
He suggests that instead of taking it personally, when your partner retreats to their cave, you can actually use that time to focus on your own needs
Okay.
and just give them the space they need to come back feeling more centered.
So like instead of it being this like rejection,
Right.
it's like, oh, this is just part of their process.
Exactly.
And like absence makes the heart grow fonder or whatever.
Exactly. Sometimes a little absence can be healthy
For sure.
for the relationship.
Okay, I like that. So caves for the guys. What about the women?
So for women, Gray uses the metaphor of waves
Waves.
to describe their emotional experience.
So they ride the waves instead of going into a cave.
Exactly.
I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, so think of it like this. When a woman is stressed or overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm.
her emotions can feel super intense and all-encompassing.
Yeah.
Like they ebb and flow, you know?
Yeah.
Sometimes bringing up past hurts or future worries.
So it's like this swirling mix of emotions
Yes.
all coming to the surface at once.
Exactly. And in those moments,
Yeah.
what's most important for a woman is to feel heard and validated.
Yeah.
You know, they're not necessarily looking for solutions.
Got it.
They just need to process those emotions by expressing them.
So instead of like jumping in to fix it,
Right.
it's more just like listen, empathize,
Exactly.
ride the wave.
Let her ride the wave.
Okay.
And Gray emphasizes how crucial it is for men to understand this because trying to offer solutions before a woman has fully processed her emotions
Mm-hmm.
can actually make her feel even more overwhelmed.
So it's about being present,
Yes.
supportive,
Yes.
not trying to control the situation,
Exactly.
and understanding that her way of communicating isn't wrong.
Right.
It's just different.
It's just different, and it's about respecting those differences
Yeah.
and learning to navigate them in a way that strengthens the connection
I love that.
instead of creating distance.
It's like you're learning a new dance.
Yes.
You got to figure out how to move together.
Exactly. And once we understand these basic differences between Martian and Venusian communication styles, then we can start to unpack some of the deeper issues that Gray explores in the book, like resentment and the need for setting healthy boundaries.
All right, so that's where we're headed next.
Exactly.
Stay tuned as we dive deeper into the world of Mars and Venus.
Absolutely.
And how these insights can transform your relationships.
Yeah.
So we've talked about caves and waves.
Yeah.
And how men and women react to stress so differently.
Right.
But it seems like resentment can build up even when things are calm. You know?
Absolutely.
Gray uses this fictional couple, Jim and Susan, to really illustrate this.
Yeah, their marriage is falling apart because Susan feels like she's giving more than she's getting.
Like she's been keeping score.
Right, exactly.
And it's not going in her favor.
It's a classic example of how, like, these unexpressed needs and resentments can just poison a relationship.
So how do we avoid falling into that trap?
Well, Gray, he's got this 3-step process to heal this kind of imbalance. And it all starts with listening.
Okay, so listening is like the key to everything.
It's the foundation.
In this book, it seems like.
It really is, because if you don't feel heard, you're not going to be motivated to work on anything.
Right.
So step 1 is creating that safe space for open and honest communication.
Got it. So once you've both felt heard, then what?
Well, then step 2 is all about personal responsibility.
Okay, so instead of expecting your partner to, like, complete you, you're taking ownership of your own happiness.
Exactly. It's about identifying your needs and finding healthy ways to meet them.
Both inside and outside the relationship.
Exactly. You can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Right, but I imagine that transition can be tough.
Oh, absolutely.
Especially if you're used to relying on your partner to meet certain needs.
For sure, and that's where step 3 comes in.
Okay, hit me with step 3.
Setting and respecting limits.
Boundaries.
Boundaries, exactly. And this is where Susan in the book starts to say no to some of Jim's requests.
Especially when she's feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, like when she told him she would go on that vacation alone.
Oh, yeah.
If he was too busy to take time off work.
Yeah, that was pretty powerful.
It was, and it might seem kind of counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But setting those boundaries can actually help create a more balanced and fulfilling relationship.
Because you're both prioritizing your own needs.
Right, exactly. When each person feels empowered to prioritize their own needs, they're less likely to feel resentful.
So it's not about being selfish.
No.
It's about being self-aware.
Exactly.
And communicating those needs.
Yes. It's about creating a dynamic where both partners feel respected and valued.
Okay, so we've got listening, personal responsibility, and boundaries.
Those are the 3 steps.
Pretty solid tools.
They are.
But, you know, it's not always easy to put these into practice.
Oh, of course not.
Especially when those Martian-Venusian communication patterns start coming back.
Yeah, this is where Gray really dives into how men and women communicate so differently.
Even when they're trying to express love.
Exactly. This is where we get into those, like, really fascinating nuances.
Okay, I'm ready. Give me the nuances.
All right, so one of the core distinctions that Gray makes is that women often talk to explore and process their feelings.
Okay.
While men primarily talk to convey information or find solutions.
So they're coming at it from completely different angles.
Completely different angles, yeah. They're speaking different languages, which leads to those frustrating situations where a woman just wants to be heard.
Yeah.
And the man keeps trying to fix the problem.
Like offering unsolicited advice.
Exactly. And he highlights this thing called abbreviated warning signals.
Okay, what are those?
Basically, they are indirect ways that women communicate their needs.
Oh, so like when a woman says, I'm fine, but she's clearly not fine?
Exactly. Or when she drops like subtle hints instead of just directly asking for what she wants.
It's like a code.
Yeah.
That the guys don't have the key to.
And men, being from Mars, are wired for much more direct communication.
Right. So they often miss those signals completely.
It leads to so much frustration on both sides.
Yes. But the good news is, once we understand these differences, we can start to communicate more effectively.
Okay, so how do we bridge the gap?
Well, Greg has some really great advice for both men and women.
Okay.
For women, he emphasizes learning to communicate their needs directly and assertively.
So just come right out and say it.
Yes, don't be afraid to be direct. And instead of asking, could you do this?
Yeah.
Phrase it as a clear request like, would you please do this?
Would you instead of could you?
Yes, exactly. Could you kind of leaves room for interpretation.
Yeah.
Whereas would you is more of a direct appeal.
Right. Makes sense.
And he gives all these examples of how to rephrase those indirect requests
Oh, cool.
into more empowering statements.
It's like a communication makeover.
Exactly.
Any other tips for mastering this art of asking for support?
Well, he talks about this power of the pregnant pause.
Okay, what is a pregnant pause? So it's simply waiting patiently after making a request, giving your partner time to process and respond.
Just let the silence hang.
Let it hang, resist the urge to fill it.
Because men need a little extra time to process.
They need that time to shift gears mentally.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So don't jump in with follow-up questions or get frustrated if they don't answer right away.
Exactly.
This is good stuff.
Right.
I'm taking notes. But wait, we can't just focus on the women?
Of course not.
What about the men?
So for men, Gray emphasizes that they are often very sensitive about requests for support.
Interesting.
Even if they don't show it outwardly.
So asking for their help is almost like an attack.
In a way, yes, it can feel like a personal attack.
I never thought of it that way.
Or a sign that they're not good enough.
Yeah.
Men, they have this deep-seated need for acceptance and approval.
Yeah.
So when their partner asks them to change something, it can trigger that fear of not being good enough.
Like they're broken.
It all comes back to that core Martian motto. Don't fix it unless it's broken.
Right. They want to feel appreciated for who they are.
Yeah.
And not constantly pressured to change.
Exactly.
So how do we balance that?
It's tricky, and this is where Gray introduces this concept called the 90-10 principle.
The 90-10 principle. Okay. Tell me more.
It's the idea that when we get upset in our relationships, only about 10% of our reaction is about the current situation.
Oh, wow.
The other 90% is tied to past unresolved feelings and experiences.
So you think you're mad about the dishes.
Right.
But really, it's like baggage from your childhood.
Exactly. And this principle applies to both men and women.
Okay.
He uses the example of a partner's criticism, triggering all these painful memories from childhood.
So let's say someone was constantly criticized by their parents growing up.
Right.
Now, anytime their partner offers any constructive feedback, it's like this huge attack.
Exactly. That old wound gets poked at.
Wow, this is deep.
It is.
So how do we navigate these emotional minefields?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
And it's a great place to pick up in the next part of our deep dive.
Perfect. So we'll unpack this 90-10 principle.
Yes.
And explore how we can all communicate more effectively even when those old wounds are flaring up. So we've uncovered some seriously deep stuff here.
We have.
This whole idea that 90% of our reactions in relationships might be tied to past hurts. It's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, it really highlights how important self-awareness is.
Right.
You know, recognizing our own baggage can help us communicate so much better.
Absolutely.
And avoid projecting those old wounds onto our partners.
Yeah, how can I expect my partner to understand my reactions if I don't even understand them myself?
Exactly.
But how do we even start to untangle all that?
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I don't even realize I'm overreacting.
Well, that's where things like therapy or journaling can be super helpful. Just creating space to kind of explore those deeper emotional patterns and understand where they're coming from.
Okay, so awareness is key. But what about those moments when we're triggered?
Right.
And that 90% is taking over. What can we do right then and there
in the moment
to keep things from escalating?
Well, Gray talks about the importance of taking responsibility for our own reactions.
So instead of oh, you made me mad, it's more like, okay, I'm feeling this way. What's my part in this?
Exactly. Even though it might feel like our partner is pushing our buttons, ultimately we're the ones choosing how we respond.
Okay, but that's way easier said than done when you're in the heat of the moment.
Oh, absolutely.
It's hard to think rationally.
Yeah. So what can we do?
Yeah. What are some concrete steps?
Okay. Well, one thing Gray recommends is taking a timeout.
Okay.
If things are getting heated, just agree to take a break from the conversation and come back to it later.
Hit the pause button.
Yes, exactly.
Before things get out of control.
Give yourselves a chance to cool down.
Okay, but what do you do during that timeout? Do you just sit and stew?
No, that's where those self-soothing techniques come in.
Okay.
Go for a walk.
Yeah.
Listen to music, meditate, whatever helps you to regulate your emotions.
So you can come back.
And come back to the conversation from a more centered place.
It's not about suppressing the emotions.
Right.
It's about processing them.
Exactly.
In a healthy way.
And then when you do come back to the conversation, Gray emphasizes speaking from your own experience,
cool.
Using I statements instead of blaming your partner.
Oh, so instead of you always make me feel,
right,
it's more like I feel this way when you.
Exactly.
Which feels a lot less confrontational.
It does. It shifts the focus from blame to understanding.
Okay.
And it creates a space for your partner to empathize with you.
Yeah.
Without feeling attacked.
Okay. This is really good stuff.
Right.
But there's one piece I'm still wondering about. Love languages.
Oh, yes.
Gray talks about how men and women express and receive love so differently.
He identifies 5 main love languages.
Yeah.
Words of affirmation, acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, and physical touch.
It's like we all have our own dialect.
And the point is, we each have a primary love language, the way that we most strongly feel loved.
So, like, if my love language is acts of service and my partner's is words of affirmation,
right,
we might be expressing love in ways that the other person doesn't really get.
Exactly. You might be doing all sorts of things for your partner.
Right.
But if they're craving words of affirmation, those actions might not translate into feeling loved.
Oh, that's a good point.
It's not just about expressing love. It's about expressing it in a language that your partner understands.
And it goes both ways, right?
Absolutely.
Like if they're showering you with gifts,
yeah,
but you really just want to spend time with them.
You might still feel unloved.
Even if they're trying.
Even with the best intentions.
So the key is to figure out each other's love language.
Yeah.
And make a conscious effort to speak.
Exactly. It's not about being perfect.
Right.
Or meeting every need all the time.
It's about the effort.
It's about making that effort to understand and appreciate those differences.
This has been such a great deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I've learned so much
Me too.
about myself, about relationships, about this whole dance of Mars and Venus.
It's a complex dance.
It is, but you know, at the end of the day, even though men and women might be from different planets, we're all here on Earth together.
We are.
Trying to figure this whole love and connection thing out.
And with a little understanding, compassion, and a willingness to communicate.
Absolutely.
We just might find a way to bridge that gap.
And create relationships that are out of this world.
Exactly.